best name. This is like an oxymoron. His name is Mark R. Conboy. And he's going to talk about identity. I want to know how your email sounds. He's actually been in the field for about 30 years, a licensed financial service professional. And he actually became certified through the identity theft risk management specialist too. He's been doing it for 30 years, like I said, and I'm going to let him go ahead and go through identity theft, especially with the whole Equifax situation that just went. So he's going to be a good hot topic to talk about. All right, Mark.
Okay, I'm not a technology guy, so hopefully I can. Perfect. Again, my name is Mark Conboy. I'm with Privacy 360. I just want to take a minute to thank Romeo and everybody here for letting me speak. And I hope you find the information I'm going to share with you informative. A little bit about the relationship. Privacy 360, we are an authorized agent for Invisis. Invisis, since 2001, has been a pioneer and industry leader in risk management for the digital age for small and mid-sized businesses and organizations. Invisis has developed and provides innovative solutions for cybersecurity, information security compliance, business identity theft protection, individual or employee identity theft protection, and data breach response services for thousands of clients in all 50 states. We have about a dozen relationships or sponsorships with nationwide trade organizations. So we've been in the field a while and we have some of the most robust products out there. The nature of today's training, small business training, is what you should know about information security and compliance. Again, a very popular topic given light of what's taking place in the market today. Let's talk about data breach risks and trends. Confidential personal business information is the new global currency of thieves. It's easier for them to steal data than to go out and try to steal cash. Okay? Now, there's been a recent study. There's been some surprising findings. There's been a shift in attack type data. The thieves are getting away from wanting your payment cards, your debit cards, and everything. They're really looking to get your personal information so that they commit identity theft in your name. They're more interested in assembling data on you as an individual than getting your payment cards and credit cards. You have to understand, no piece of information, personal information, is innocuous. Criminals will just amass bits of data on people, waiting until they have enough information so that their fraud attempt is likely to succeed. It's getting very sophisticated. Everything is valuable. Okay, you have to understand, they build a file on you. So one bit of information could be the last piece of a puzzle that someone needs to commit fraud in your name. Now, the dark web, the underground markets, they sell full sets of identities on individuals. Sometimes they sell for as little as $10. Okay, these contain enough financial, geographic, or biographical information to facilitate identity theft or other impersonation-based fraud. Some of these sets of identities even have can get the bad guys to pass those irritating questions, secret questions that the websites ask you to verify your identity. And the other thing you have to be aware of is if you're a victim of a breach, your information is out there. It really never comes back. So you're actually vulnerable for a long period of time, years if not decades, okay? How bad is the problem? Well, 6 billion records were compromised in the first 6 months of 2017. It's a very large number, okay? And to try to give you a reason why we have the problem, I'm going to tell a story and maybe change that, ask a question, change that question a little bit and hope you'll understand why the problem is so severe. I want you to think of your name, address, date of birth, driver's license, and social security number, those 5 bits of information. Now think about your close personal circle of friends, the people, your family, the people who go to their house for dinner, they come over to your house for dinner. Now, how many of those people have those 5 bits of information? Your name, address, date of birth, driver's license, and social security number. Okay, right. So typically the answer is none, 1, 2, okay? Very few. So as individuals, we're doing a great job protecting our personal information. Now I'm going to change the question, and if Steven's in the room, I get to play attorney, I can ask and answer. I'm going to change the question a little bit to hopefully give you a better idea why we have a problem. From the day you were born until today, how many businesses, schools, hospitals, organizations have you given your name, address, date of birth, driver's license, and social security number to?
All of them.
Okay, right. Now when we do that, when I'm filling out the form, in my mind, there's an implied trust there that they're doing the right thing to protect that information. Okay. Well, as if you follow the news, you realize that that's probably not the case in a lot of instances. Okay. Another reason, I went to the boat show here locally last year in West Palm Beach, and this happened to me again at a department store the other day. I'm walking into the boat show, I give them my ticket, and they say, "Do you have your driver's license, sir?" I said, "Absolutely." They wanted to scan my driver's license. So I said, I'm really not comfortable having you do that, and they naturally declined. Does anybody know the amount of information that's on the back of a driver's license? That even your voter registration number's on the back of your driver's license, okay? Now, doing what I do for a living, I was very suspect that that show producer would properly protect that database of possibly tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of driver's licenses, okay? And the department store the other day wanted to do it too. I couldn't believe it. 85% of breaches are at small businesses. Okay, the only ones we hear about are the big breaches for the large organizations. But the bad guys know that if small and medium-sized businesses are probably less able or have less systems in place to protect their data. Okay, so they attack small businesses every day. Over the last 4 years, cyber criminals have increasingly targeted small businesses as soft targets for data theft. And depending upon the study, I read a lot, I'm kind of neurotic. Hackers have breached about half of all small businesses in the United States. So chances are, you might not know it, but chances are someone has penetrated, tried to penetrate, or penetrated, at least 50% of the businesses in this room into your systems, okay? 49% of breaches are caused by employees. Now, most employees are good employees, remember, but they just don't know what they don't know, okay? Cyber attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated, and it's very easy to be fooled by emails, links, or attachments that look like everyday business reports, okay? And as an owner or an executive, it only takes one click for malware, viruses, or ransomware to infiltrate your system, compromising your important business data. Ransomware, 4,000 businesses a day are held hostage. Ransomware is when the hacker, locks you out of your computer, encrypts your data, and then demands payment to give you access to your data again. And technically, that's a breach. Even if you have ransomware, you pay the fee and everything, technically you've been breached because someone's accessed your information. Owner executive accountability and liability. There's a shifting accountability. In today's marketplace, I don't believe it would be acceptable for a CEO or an owner to be able to say, well, I wasn't aware of data breaches. I wasn't aware of the severity of the issue. It's getting a lot of press, okay? Executives and owners are under increased scrutiny. It should be incorporated, into your business planning, information security compliance. And the reason that management should be aware of this, it's a very fluid market, okay? There have been a couple of recent federal court decisions, and again, decisions go, they shift all the time. But recently, decisions, we've had companies that have had breaches, breached data. And these decisions address whether the personal information that was accessed by the hacker, or the thief, okay, whether they had standing just because the information was hacked. They couldn't prove harm, but the information was breached, okay? So there are two recent court decisions that said, even though there was no harm, okay, they could move forward with their class action lawsuits. So the no harm, no foul defense wasn't successful. So what happened to those businesses? Well, they had to incur further litigation costs beyond the initial pleading stage because of the nature of what happened. Cyber insurance demand. Cyber insurance can be a important component in a comprehensive information security compliance plan. I talk to a lot of business owners, executives, and even insurance brokers that sell cyber insurance, and sometimes they think that that's the cure. Well, I have cyber insurance and I'm covered. I can assure you that's not the case, but cyber insurance can be a very critical component of a comprehensive information security compliance plan. Okay, how do breaches happen? Let's talk about that for a minute. Hacking and cyber attacks. Well, we're all familiar with that. If you listen to the news, not a day goes by or not a week goes by that there's not some type of information on a hack or a breach. Some of them very substantial. Anthem a couple of years ago was a substantial breach in the medical industry. Equifax, because of the nature of the information that they have on people, again, a very, very serious breach, probably putting 150 million Americans at risk. Employee error and negligence. Okay? Remember, the majority of employees you hire are good employees. They want to do the right thing. But 95% of employers have employees who breach network security because they're not aware of things they should or shouldn't do. Again, so your employees can be a problem for you. Insider theft, again, probably a rare occurrence because most employees are good employees, but you can have that employee that's going to steal your information, email a database to somebody, copy records and take them out of the office. About 6 or 7 years ago, there were some branch managers of financial institutions that were actually selling the records of their clients for like $10 a piece. So again, that it does happen on a day-to-day basis, and again, you have to be conscious of this. Physical theft, it could be someone breaking into your office to steal things. It can be as simple as you park your car, you leave your laptop or your tablet in your car, somebody steals your car or breaks your car window and takes your laptop, okay? Physical theft is a problem as well. And then you have vendors and service providers, okay? I'll cover more of this later, but you have to be conscious of the companies you're doing business with. Are they safe? What are the parameters they have in place if you're working with them? Okay, it's a very important component. So let's talk about third-party risks, okay? Your vendors and service providers can put your business at risk, okay? The best way I can explain why this is a problem, because sometimes it's hard to get your head around this, okay? Everybody remember when the Target breach about 5 or 6 years ago was a very big deal at the time. It was, I think, the largest breach ever. Okay. Does anybody know how the bad guys got into the Target network?
Wi-Fi?
No, but that's a real problem as well. What the bad guys did, the bad guys piggybacked in off one of their HVAC vendors' access into their system. Okay? Now, obviously an HVAC guy doesn't have access into the financial or accounting side of the system. They got into the mechanical side of the system. Okay? And again, I'm not a technology guy, but they worked their magic. They got to where they wanted to be, and then they went undetected for several years. Okay? So again, when we talk about service providers, again, it's a pretty big world, and it's something that all business should be conscious of. Okay? Now, what qualifies as a data breach? Now, this can be electronic or paper. It doesn't matter. And it's an incident in which any confidential personal or business information is potentially exposed, lost, or stolen. Okay? And let me take a minute here to go over that. There's a lot of laws, I'll get into the laws later on, but the federal laws were written to cover different types of data. Okay? So here, personal health information. If I said HIPAA, everyone knows HIPAA laws cover health information. Okay? So what is personal health information? Medical records or history, health insurance, treatment, medication, medical billing, claims, anything like that. Okay? If any of that information is exposed, lost, or stolen, you have a breach on your hands. Okay? Financial information. Graham-Leach-Bliley, the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act is the law that was enacted to cover financial information. Okay? And financial information includes not only payment cards and debit cards, but checking and banking, payroll, W-2, 1099s, tax returns, credit report and scores, accounting records, investment, real estate, just about anything you can attach a dollar sign to, okay, is protected information. Now, personal identifiable information, that's covered by the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act, also known as FACTA. You might not know of that act, but you do know the act was put into place because that's the act that gave you the chance to see your credit report once a year for free. Okay? And what is personal identifiable information? Just about anything that can revert back to you as an individual. Name, date of birth, birth certificate, email, password, username, address, phone number, driver's license, passport, military ID. Anything that's going to revert back to you is personal identifiable information and protected under laws. Okay? Also, there's contracts, business client data, and intellectual property. Again, to me, that if you think in a broad scope, that makes sense. If you have sensitive information, either on your organization or another organization, if it gets into the wrong hands, it could cause problems. Okay, so that's also protected information that you're supposed to be conscious of and making sure you're taking precautions to protect. Now, there's obviously financial risks associated with data breaches. So if your business suffers even a small breach, you have several types of costs. First of all, there's direct costs. They're about $225 a record, most recent figure. That's for investigation, public relations, victim notification, and remediation. So again, if you think of try to get your mind around the number of records that your organization has in your network, in your database. If it's just 1,000 records, it could be upwards of $225,000 in direct costs. Medical records cost a little bit more. I think to remediate the direct costs for medical records are around $400 a record. Okay, so as you can see, if it's 1,000, it's expensive. If it's 5,000, 10,000, more than that, the cost can get to be pretty substantial. Then you have regulatory fines and penalties. Okay, under each law, remember the laws cover different sets of data. So under Graham-Leach-Bliley, and again, the penalties are assessed based upon the nature of the breach. They're going to take into account how the breach happened. So if you did nothing, they're going to look at you one way. If you did a whole bunch of things, okay, they're going to look at you another way. And I want you to think of there's state and federal privacy laws. I want you to think of them. Everybody here is familiar with OSHA, right? Okay, OSHA states in a nutshell, if you have training, annual training, and you have policy and procedures written, and you do that annually, it doesn't mean people aren't going to get hurt. It simply means if you have an accident on the job, you've complied as far as the government is concerned, so you're not subject to fines and penalties under the law because you comply. Okay? Privacy laws work the same way. If you're compliant, it doesn't mean you're not going to have a breach. It simply means that you're in a position to demonstrate that you've taken steps to institute best practices and minimum standards. Okay? So let's get back to the fines, the regulatory fines. Under Graham-Leach-Bliley for financial information, the fines can go in egregious instances up to $100,000 for each violation. They can hold officers and owners personally liable for up to $10,000 per violation. You can have civil and criminal penalties for fraud and negligence, including fines and imprisonment. And again, these would be in egregious cases, but you could even see jail removal of management under Graham-Leach-Bliley. And think about it, some of the information is very personal and very important, so they expect you to do something to protect it. Under medical information, under HIPAA, again, depending upon where you are on the scale, you can see it from $1,000 a violation to $50,000 a violation. And again, under egregious cases, you can have management executives could get jail time up to 10 years in jail. For personal identifiable information under FACTA, $2,500 per occurrence for federal and state fines. Civil liability, $1,000 per occurrence. Class action lawsuits with no statutory limitation. Okay? And again, in certain cases, you can be held responsible for the actual losses of the individuals. So they're putting some teeth into these laws because they want organizations to take notice. Business disruption. If you experience a data breach, you're going to take resources, company resources, and they're going to be dedicated to breach remediation. Okay, so it's going to be you're going to be paying attention and doing things that you don't do during the normal course of your business day. So you're going to experience business disruption. Okay? Then you're going to have reputation damage, and it's been proven on average, about 33% of customers consider leaving after you have a data breach. Okay, so we all know how challenging it is to get customers. It's easier to keep them than to get new customers. So this can be a very costly part of a data breach. Okay, it's actually the most significant cost of a data breach. They're not the regulatory costs, they're not the breach remediation, but from lost business. Your damage to your reputation and the churn from consumers who leave following a breach can have a significant impact on your bottom line. And then we have civil lawsuits. And again, in certain cases, you're going to have to defend them. It might be challenging to get them dismissed. And in certain cases, there's no limit on the liability on what they can try to come after you for. Okay. Now, I talked about some serious issues here with respect to compliance. What I'd like to take a moment to talk about is what's the outcome? Okay, you see all these things that happen, but what's the outcome of these issues that we discussed? Okay, the outcome is identity theft. Okay, and everybody here is aware of the Federal Trade Commission, right? They're like the Better Business Bureau. If you have a complaint, you call the Federal Trade Commission. And what they do is they catalog these complaints, and each year they issue a Consumer Sentinel report where they rank what was the largest complaint they received. So for about 15 or 16 years in a row, identity theft was the #1 complaint that came into the Federal Trade Commission. So they did what I think any good organization would. They started to do some investigation. Why is this happening? Year after year after year, why is this happening? And what they concluded was that half of the problem was because businesses were breaching data. Okay? So that's why we're seeing these laws, and that's why we're seeing states enact laws as well. Okay, what they're trying to do is institute some minimum practices and the best standards so that we can mitigate what is the #1 crime in the country today, which is identity theft, okay? So I just want to talk about identity theft for a couple minutes. It is the #1 crime in the country, hands down by a factor of 10 to 1. I used to have a website, I think I should try and find the website again. I could click on it and it would track crime in real time while I'm speaking, so I would set it to 0, and at the end of the presentation I would go back to it. And invariably, identity theft was the #1 crime by a factor of 8 to 10 to 1 every time I would talk. Okay, so it's a really big issue for our citizens. Okay, again, 6 billion records hacked. That was actually just in the first 6 months of 2017. So, take a look around the room. After this Equifax data breach, chances are everyone here has exposure. Your information is out there, and again, you can't get it back once it's out there. 15.4 million victims in 2016. That's up over 18%, 18% higher than 2015. And again, all the statistics I'm quoting here, this is what's reported. So chances are the numbers are probably a little bit higher in each category. Okay, 1 in 10 children are already victims, which is a crime in itself. Think about this: 320 million people in the country. We know of 116 million social security numbers that are compromised. 1 in 3 Americans are already victims of healthcare data breaches, and 2 out of 3 Americans have already been affected by a data breach. Again, I would say that statistic is probably low based upon the Equifax breach from a couple of weeks ago. So again, very troubling statistics. Therefore, businesses are asked to pay attention to the data that they have. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is types of identity theft. Okay. Most people think of identity theft. What do they think of? Bad charge on your credit card or debit card, right? Anybody ever have that happen in the room?
Yeah.
What was the first thing you did?
Call the credit card.
What did they do? Do an investigation.
Yeah.
They find out it's not you. What do?
Credit
Remove
back
it.
and then-
Right. Okay. Unfortunately, most people think that's the majority of identity theft. Well, that's really only 33% of the crime. Okay? And we can solve it with a phone call. Okay? 67% of the crime is outside of identity theft in very serious areas. Okay? Let's talk about tax fraud for a while. Everybody knows tax fraud. People filing tax returns in your name. Okay? Couple interesting things here. And again, they're trying to do their best to mitigate it, but the criminals are always smarter than law enforcement, or they always stay one step ahead. If they were only good guys, we'd have a great world. The IRS won't warn 500,000 victims about undocumented workers stealing their Social Security numbers. That was an article from about 6 weeks ago. So the IRS knows of theft that's going on. They just don't inform the citizens. The U.S. Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration reviewed millions of tax returns filed by undocumented workers in 2015. And then the Inspector General released a formal audit showing that those tax returns included an estimated 1.5 million cases of identity theft. And so that's for a single year. So again, even though you're monitoring your own stuff, bad things can be happening because your information is out there. Child identity theft. For myself, when I was born, you didn't get a Social Security number. They're assigned at birth now. You used to wait till you started work and then you applied for one. Okay, but now you get that little letter in the mail as soon as you have a child. Well, why would a bad guy want to get a child's information? Okay? He could go out there. They can go out there and commit fraud for years or decades in that child's name before anybody notices it. Okay. And children are actually 51 more times more likely to become victims of identity theft than adults. That's because they're so susceptible. I got a wonderful 22-year-old daughter up in Florida State. She's on social media constantly. A gentleman who said Wi-Fi before. If you're on social media and Wi-Fi, you are really susceptible to identity. I don't want to get into the particulars today. Conversation for another time for another conversation. But our college students, or our children that are really addicted to social media, again, are highly susceptible to identity theft. Okay? Medical identity theft. It's rightly been called the privacy crime that can kill. Okay? And I know it's hard for good people think everybody's good. Okay? It's hard to imagine that somebody would commit medical identity theft, but there are people that will go out there and get your information and actually go get treatment, surgery, buy drugs in your name. Okay? And again, I read a lot. There are articles of where people go out and use someone else's information when they're pregnant to deliver their baby. Down here in good old South Florida, it's very common for people to use someone's information to go get plastic surgery. Okay? Or they'll just go out there and buy prescription drugs, whether they want to consume them or sell them for money. Okay? And then when a victim's identity is fraudulently used, the medical records become contaminated. Okay? And that erroneous information or false diagnosis or inaccurate information, okay, can actually endanger the patients if you're going to get medical care. If there's bad stuff in your record, the doctor's going to make decisions based on what's in your record. Okay? Medical identities are actually about 20 times more valuable than financial identities on the black market. And criminals are, again, they're targeting the elderly. They're really going after the elderly people for this because they're more susceptible as well. And the government is actually trying to combat this on Medicare cards. They're going to take your Social Security number off it this year and next year. They're going to mail you a card if you're on Medicare with a unique identifier. So we're always trying to stay on top of things. But again, the bad guys seem to stay one step ahead of us. Government benefits. They love to go out and get whatever type of benefit of yours they can get, whatever it may be. Okay? If anybody wants to take a look at this, October 9th, I received a letter from the U.S. Small Business Administration, and it stated that you recently registered with FEMA for assistance with your disaster losses. Needless to say, I've never done that. Okay? So government benefits fraud is probably one of the largest segments of of identity theft, and it's just rampant. Think about anywhere anybody can get a government benefit, the bad people are out there trying to take advantage of it. If somebody wants to look at this, I'm happy to show it to you. Financial. Again, when they get your information, they can go out there and lines of credit, mortgages, credit cards in your name if you're not protecting yourself. Criminal identity theft. And just think about it. Again, this happens. They simply get a phony driver's license, and it's very easy to get a driver's license. I was speaking with a gentleman the other day, a business colleague whose son is at Florida State, and he shared the story with me. He's up there with his son, and his son goes, they're out at a restaurant, his son goes, "Dad, can I have a beer?" He goes, "If you can get a beer, I'll pay for it." So the waitress comes, they order a beer, son takes out his driver's license, gives it to the waitress, comes back with the beer. Phony information, bad information, counterfeit driver's licenses are very easy to get. Technology today, they look pretty good too. But again, just think about it. Somebody has their picture and your driver's license information. They go, they get stopped, they get 3 or 4 tickets. They don't care because it's your information. Next time you're driving 70 in a 55, they pull you over, they run your license, they say, "Get out of the car, put your hands behind your back." Again, happens all too frequently. Synthetic identity theft. This is where is when criminals mix and match real and fabricated personally identifiable information to create an identity. Okay, so they might take your Social Security number, make up someone else's address, and they just mix and match it, and they go out there and they do bad things with that ID. It's actually, synthetic identity theft is actually the fastest growing form of identity theft in the auto finance field right now, and they think it could be as high as $6 billion today. Okay? So I just wanted to touch base on what the outcome of data breaches are, because it's real and it impacts everybody on a day-to-day basis. So again, it's not just about credit cards. Okay, that's actually the least important part of identity theft. So based on all of this, we're starting to see businesses get pressure. Okay, you're getting pressure from customers. Businesses can face a growing demand to provide proof they meet minimum information security regulations and standards. Now, all the laws, state, federal, international regulations, they all revolve around a common theme. There's certain things you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to be able to demonstrate that you did that. And you're going to start to see business associates, service providers, and customers ask you, "Can you show me some of that? Can I see your last security assessment? Can I see your last risk assessment?" Okay, that's starting to happen, and as this information gets out, I think it'll happen on a more frequent basis. So you really need to be able to be in a position to provide security assessments and questionnaires. You're going to be getting it from customers and service providers. You need to be able to respond. If you're doing your job properly, when you get that request, it's not a big deal. You send it to them, you give it to them. Here it is. Okay. Then you need the business associate regulatory requirement. Right. Okay. The bottom line is that, and I see this all the time. Okay. If you're doing business with someone, and you guys are sharing information, you really need to make sure that each party is doing the right thing. Okay? And if you sign a business associate agreement, that business associate is liable for any data breaches attributed to a failure at your end. And many of those agreements have no limits on liability, so they create a significant financial risk for the business associate, okay? And again, your customers, you need to be in compliance for this, and be prepared. Don't be surprised if at some point in time in the near future a customer asks you regarding this, okay? And then you have contractual requirements in business and service agreements. I get called in a lot of times if I talk to a business, they get a contract from a large organization. Again, it happens frequently. They'll call me in and say, what does this mean? What does this information mean here? Subparagraph 2A. Basically, if you're doing business with a large organization, somewhere embedded in that contract or service agreement, you're signing off that you're in compliance with all information security regulations. And if anything happens on your end, you're letting them off the hook. Okay? I have a 215 insurance license. I really don't use it a lot anymore. But if I go to get appointed with an insurance company, okay, rest assured in that appointment paperwork, I'm signing that I'm in compliance with all federal and state securities laws. For insurance agents, individual agents, if you have a license and you looked into selling on the exchange, any ACA policies, in your training, you're clicking certifying that you're in compliance with all information securities laws. So it's out there. People just don't know what it means when they check that box that they've done. Okay? And that's going to start to become more and more prevalent. So again, let's talk about the regulations. Remember, we have federal regulations, we have state regulations. Okay, the federal regulations, we talked about them. HIPAA for health information, Gramm-Leach-Bliley for financial information. I left FACTA off, that covers your personal identifiable information. The red flags rule is actually an enforcement action. Okay, that's the one that kind of holds your feet to the fire. And then there's always new laws that are coming. Based upon the nature of the marketplace, they're refining the laws, or maybe say putting more teeth into them, okay? Then you have state data breach laws. 48 states have them. DC, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. Anybody in the room have customers outside of your Florida office? Any customers that live in states outside of Florida? Okay. Well, if you have a breach, you have to be compliant in every state where you have customers that reside. So again, it can be a daunting task if this is something you want to do on your own. Now, interestingly, things are changing. Historically, consumer agencies, state consumer agencies, and attorney generals, what they did was enforce notification requirements for victims of cyber attacks whenever data was compromised, okay? Significant enforcement actions was always the purview of the federal government. Okay? We're starting to see that change given the scope of recent breaches and the sensitivity of the information that's been breached. Again, Equifax, Anthem, okay? States have recently stepped up and launched their own investigations and enforcement actions. They've imposed new data protection standards on various types of businesses. So assuming this trend continues, which I believe it will, organizations responsible for defending against cyber attacks or who find themselves victim of a successful hack may find themselves with both federal and state regulators to deal with. And that's the way the market's going. Again, the market is trending towards stronger enforcement. I mean, these laws have been on the book. Gramm-Leach-Bliley has been on the books 20 years. A lot of this is not new. They're just moving towards strengthening or strongly encouraging businesses to get into compliance. Okay, New York State a couple of months ago, they passed a law where the board of certain financial service companies must certify that that company is in compliance to the state insurance commissioner annually. And again, if you're a CEO or an owner, if you've ever been on a board of director, that's some substantial liability to be taking on. You're not going to certify for the risk that you have without making sure that that's done. Okay? Now, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners has recently proposed a cybersecurity law that adheres to New York State standards. Okay? There's the NAIC. They've always been issuing proposals and recommendations and saying this is what you should do. Well, now they are going to say it's not that you should do it. Now you have to do it. Okay? And again, organizations are going to be, it establishes standards for data security that are going to apply to insurance companies, brokers, and individual agents. Okay? Organizations are going to have a written information security policy, protecting sensitive data, incidents response plans, data recovery plans to demonstrate their preparedness for cyber events. And they're going to have to certify that they've met these requirements annually to the state insurance commission. Okay? Think about, I don't want to say every company, but certainly in the financial field, I think you're going to see this trend continue. I think you're going to see it be a little bit more broad-based than just the insurance commissioners. I wouldn't be surprised if this trips over to the medical community and then the legal community. Just think of the type of data, the amount of data and type of data that they have. So you also have international regulations. Okay, here we have in the EU, we have the General Data Protection Regulation. U.S. businesses must protect all personal data for individuals or businesses from any of the 28 EU countries. Again, the steps to do so are very common, but if you're doing business internationally, watch out. Okay, penalties up to 4% of your annual revenue. In Canada, we have PIPEDA. Okay, this is the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. It's national data privacy protection law covering all types of personal information, very similar to our laws. And now you're seeing provinces adapt data privacy laws as well. So just understand, if you're doing business internationally outside of the U.S., you should investigate, because you probably need to be compliant with regulations in whatever country or zone that you're in. Let's talk about some data security standards. Everybody here is aware of PCI compliance. Not that hard to get. Chances are although I know I'm doing business with a gentleman who owns a merchant services company, and he said to me, it cost me $2, don't worry about it. So I guess it's very easy to get PCI compliant, okay? Again, we have financial security audits and reports. We have technical security audits and reports, ISO standards. Then we have the National Institute of Standards and Technology, okay? Their cybersecurity framework is the closest we have to a national standard for cybersecurity. And I think we're seeing that start to come a little bit closer. The framework contains 5 steps to manage risk, and they're all pretty common. Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. There's a common theme amongst all these regulations, okay? And again, we talked about the American Bar Association, Resolution 109. They passed a resolution strongly recommending to law firms to have a cybersecurity program in place. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if that recommendation gets a little bit more stronger, gains some strength, because law firms, I think it's like 10,000 law firms are breached a day, or something like 10,000 penetrations a day. And again, if you think about the type of data they have, liabilities. And then we talked about the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. They've already been the first ones to take that step from, here's a guideline to its law. Make sure you get your stuff in order. Okay, so let's talk about there's 10 key areas of compliance. Okay. The first one is management, commitment, and assigned responsibility. Like anything else, as much as I'm not a Patriot fan, they have a great organization. It doesn't matter who the player goes down, they take some guy, they trade for a guy from another team, they throw him on the field, he does great. Is it that player all of a sudden became great? Or did he just come into a system where from the top down, they strive to be excellent? Okay? So it has to be the same way with information security compliance. At the highest level, if management doesn't take it serious, anything you put into place is probably not going to be effective. Okay? And you have to assign responsibility. This is not the kind of thing you can just say, I'm going to do, here's my 4-page plan, I'm going to put it in the drawer here, if I have a problem, I'm going to take it out. And, it can't work like that. Mostly cybersecurity responses continue to be reactive rather than proactive. And even though there's security systems in place to prevent incidents, I think too many organizations are unprepared for when that incident actually does happen, and then they spend a lot more time reacting because they weren't properly prepared, and they don't have that top-down culture of security. Okay, you need an information security plan. It's policy and procedures. Okay, the way you develop that is by doing regular risk and compliance assessments. You have to look internally in your business. What do I have? How am I protecting it? What do I do with it? Okay? Based on the answers to those questions, you then develop policy and procedures specific to your organization. Okay? And it's very effective when you do that. Obviously, technical safeguards are important, but you need to have not just security. You need to test these. You need to monitor them. Okay? But technical safeguards are a very important component in an information security plan. They're not the only thing. Physical security, okay? Do I lock my file cabinets? What happens when I leave and the cleaning people are here? Okay, how strong are our passwords? Where do our people put their PDAs and their laptops? Okay? Physical security, again, is an important component as well of a comprehensive information security compliance program. Human resource and employee training. Every department has to buy into it. Human resources is certainly going to be an integral part of the plan. And you have to train your employees. Right? Employee training is inexpensive, but it's critical. Remember, your employees only know what they know, and they don't know what they don't know. So if your employees are properly trained, they can be your first and best line of defense against protecting against breaches. Okay? Business associate and vendor security, we talked about that. If you're doing business with someone and you're sharing information, according to the law, it's incumbent upon you to check each other out, see how you're doing, maybe provide some documentation, that everybody's doing at least partially what you should do, or in the best case scenario, everybody's in compliance, with the laws. Business continuity and disaster plan. Again, this is something that should be done prior to an event. Imagine trying to put together a disaster plan after the disaster, okay? Again, and this is part of that business disruption. You want to mitigate business disruption if you have a breach. Do these things prior to an event happening. Then you need a breach response plan. Again, what you want to do is you want to make sure that if you have an incident, you're just pulling your plan out and you're following step by step, and you have the people in place who know what to do because they're familiar with the plan. It's not something you just want to take on because you've had a breach, or obviously it's the least effective way to do it. Then you need ongoing review, testing, and updates to your policies and controls. Again, this is not the kind of thing that you can just prepare it, stick it in the drawer. The amount of review, testing you need is going to be based on your business, and that's going to become glaringly important and obvious after you do your risk assessment. I mean, business A might only need to do it once a year. Business B might have to do it every quarter because they have substantially more data and more risk. And then you need to make sure it's updated, and that's a challenge for an organization because I'm telling you, these states, the federal government not so much, but the states are changing the laws and the requirements annually. I mean, so how do you keep up with that? If you don't have your finger on the pulse, your plan might not be active even though you've tried to do it. Okay? So, there are actually 60 to 80 unique information security and privacy requirements or best practices within these categories that your firm should follow and provide evidence of compliance. It's one thing to say I did it, it's another thing to be able to document it. Okay? So, where are we? Brings us to breach prevention and compliance. It's actually a new management responsibility, and it should be a principle of business success for every organization that's out there. Okay? Every organization in every industry and of every size is at risk for a data breach. The majority of breaches are small and may go undetected for a long time. But when they are detected, most organizations lack the internal resources to handle the data breach response, putting them at greater risk for fines, penalties, lawsuits, reputational harm, and obviously customer identity theft, okay? But that's what I mean by the Patriots, top-down system of top-down culture. If management takes it serious, employees are going to take it serious, and that could be the best line of defense when your employees are knowledgeable and trained to protect your organization. So what should you do? Okay? You got to get executive level support and commitment. I know I harp on that, but it's really important. And I'll just share a little. If I get invited into a business to talk, if I'm not talking to the CEO or the owner, very rarely am I successful because the employee I'm talking to, they don't care about that risk. It's not their liability. But if I'm talking to the CEO or the owner, more times than not, if I have the right ear, they're going to listen to what I'm going to say. Okay? So it's very important from the top down to understand that. You have to have the owners and CEOs have to understand the risks and liabilities. You've got to translate security into business planning, and you have to invest in cybersecurity and formalize a compliance management program. Again, top-down culture of security and privacy. You have to assign responsibility. Somebody has to take responsibility for the plan. In large organizations, this has been elevated to a C-level position. It's a Chief Information Security Officer. Okay? In a recent report, and this is very common too, 60% of respondents or businesses rely solely on their IT department to manage data breach response. It's much bigger than an IT department. And I know your IT department is doing everything that they believe they should be doing to protect your business, but again, I don't believe they're compliance experts, and again, in their case, there might be things that they just don't know that they should be doing or they should be doing for the business. Okay? The best practice is a cross-functional team with a combination of specialties to handle a data breach to fully protect the organization and meet privacy and regulation requirements. So you really need to coordinate across all departments. Now again, it's not going to disrupt your business once you get it implemented. It's something that you just stay current, kind of takes care of itself. You need to implement an information security compliance program. And there are several components in this. Okay. Everything I'm talking to you about comes out of the Protecting Personal Information, a Guide for Businesses from the Federal Trade Commission. It's not me making it up. It's not the business making it up. I have copies of this if anybody wants to have them. Okay? Let's take a look at it. Again, there are standard things you need to do. You need to have a formalized information security plan, policy and procedures. How do you get that? It doesn't come out of thin air. You do that because you're doing thorough risk assessments and compliance assessments. That's going to then let you know how you're doing with your administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. Are you meeting minimum standards and best practices? You need to implement these safeguards. Once you identify things you need to do, you actually need to do it. Okay. Training, all personnel and ongoing, needs to be at least annually because threats change. It's very inexpensive, but again, the companies that do it are much better positioned to protect against data breaches. Secure your third-party service provider agreements. Again, find out who you're working with, have a little conversation about what's going on internally in each organization, how are we doing. Okay? An incident response plan. Okay? Again, you need to have your all these things done ahead of time, so that if you have an issue, you're pulling the plan out of the drawer. The proper people that are supposed to do it, they're supposed to take care of it, put it into action. Okay. And consider cyber liability insurance. Again, there are some business owners I've talked to that think that's it. I got cyber liability insurance. I'm covered. Okay. Well, let me talk about cyber liability insurance for a minute. And I've talked to people that have purchased it, and I've talked to brokers that have sold it. When I hear somebody saying I have cyber liability insurance, I like to ask them one question. Okay? What metric did you use to determine your level of coverage, which determines your premium? Typically, I get a deer in headlights look. Okay? Well, if you have an information security plan, it's going to help you if you're looking to get cyber liability insurance on two issues. First of all, it's going to help you quantify your risk. So you're going to have a much better idea of maybe what coverage I should buy, match it up against the premium you're willing to spend. But more importantly, if you're going for cyber liability insurance, they underwrite you. Typically, they're going to send you information. You're going to be checking boxes. What are they doing? They want to see how compliant you are with information security regulations. So if you can send them back your third-party validated plan that you meet or exceed all minimum standards and best practices, you should get the lowest rate the company offers on your cyber liability insurance. So it can save you money in that regard as well. Business basics, okay? Audit readiness and legal defensibility. Again, you can't create a plan and stick it in the drawer only to pull it out when you have an incident. It's got to be kept current. It needs to have regular updates, and again, that depends on your business. For some businesses, it might be once a year. Other businesses, it could be every quarter. And then customer trust and privacy assurance. When you do this, be proud of it. Put it on your website. Tell people about it. Show it to them. Again, we all know how hard it is to get customers. I'm not going to say that this is going to gain you customers, okay? But the value in doing this, it could help you keep customers. It could differentiate you in the marketplace from other companies as well if they don't do this. Be able to respond to requests for security audits from customers and service providers. Don't be afraid of that. Almost encourage it. When it comes in, have the person who's assigned to say, here you go. Just send it to them, okay? And I think that the most important part of this is be able to show third-party certification. Okay? I think the strongest position a company can be in is where you can show that you have a third party that is validated and can certify with documents and proof of testing that on an ongoing basis you meet or exceed all minimum standards and best practices. Okay? I think that's the strongest position anybody can be in. Now, you have several options to do this. Okay? Large organizations, hire a consultant. Okay? Very expensive, but they bring in the attorneys, the accountants, and they customize a program for that organization. Or large financial service organizations, any large organization, that's typically what they do. You could do it yourself. Typically, from my purview, it's not the smartest thing to do. You can buy a template out there. You could read the laws, take a look at this, and try to do it yourself. Not sure if that's the most effective way for you to go, though. hope and pray. You can stick your head in the sand, okay? In today's market, I really don't recommend that, okay? Unfortunately, that's the path a lot of businesses do take. Or you can use a qualified third-party vendor, and generally this is the route that most small to medium-sized businesses take because it's cost-effective and you know you're getting proper service. Part of the reason why you're dealing with Romeo and PayMaster, he knows his stuff. He stays on top of his stuff. So again, that's typical of the most effective way for an organization to go. But again, I want to say if you're going to take that route, I would want to make sure that my plan can be validated and certified, so that if I go to court, I have documents from a third party validating and showing everything that I did. It's the best way to protect yourself. Now, I appreciate you letting me get all of that out. It's like a fire hose of information. I know. I just want to see if anybody has any questions.
Mark, I have 3 questions. The first one is...
Questions are free today.
Oh, thank you. Okay. If you have 1 bit of PI that gets out, you're writing a letter to a customer and it has their name and address, and instead of saying, Dear Mr. Jones, you say, Dear Mrs. Susie Smith, but everything else is related to Mr. Jones. Is that considered a data breach?
Yeah, it is, but again, that would fall on the more the insignificant side. But yeah, anything inaccurate that's disseminated qualifies as a breach.
Thank you for that. The second question is, I'm not being facetious, but you spoke earlier about cosmetic surgery being potentially medical theft, that folks are
Correct.
getting medical identity theft. And every time I've ever looked at cosmetic surgery in my group health insurance plan, it's never covered unless it's a result of an accident or some reconstruction. So how the heck are these folks getting?
I can't answer the how. I can only send you the articles reporting that people are actually out there doing this. Again, like I said, I read a lot. I get, 25, 30 articles a day on this.
I want to get that article because like I said, it's interesting. Many times employees will ask, oh, well, is cosmetic surgery covered? And it never is. It seems like in these group
I'd be happy to send you that.
somehow they're getting it. Thank you. My third question is when you said having a robust test to prove that you have these particular things in place and be able to prove it. And you mentioned Romeo. So you're saying through having PayMaster, we're stating that our systems are safe?
No, I just said you use Romeo because he really understands payroll. You know you're getting a great service from Romeo. That's what I
That
meant.
we definitely know. In terms of getting third-party certification about when you spoke about that, is that something your company does?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a cloud-based system. There's no, I hate to say nobody else has stuff because I don't know what everybody does. But we have a tremendously affordable cloud-based system that will put you into compliance with every information security regulation that's out there, and we do the validation and the testing and document it. We've got a very good system that's very affordable.
Sure. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Just a pure question. Is there any accessibility to training for us managers who, with laws changing every day?
Training is one of the components of our information security and compliance program. Everything you need if you want to get into compliance is offered through our program. There are times when I'll do training. In other words, I'll try to provide a value-added service wherever I can. But again, I'm just one man, so sometimes I try not to get stretched too thin. But I don't know of anything on the internet. If you go out there to try to find it, maybe you could Google it. But again, the training, the reason that I'm not a fan of stuff like that is the training needs to be kept current. So you need to make sure that wherever you're getting that training, it's current based upon new issues or regulations or things you should be made aware of.
So really the best option would be to really engage a third-party vendor that would be able
It's certainly a viable option, and it can be really cost effective for you because there's a number of ways to get it. And I'd be happy to talk to you about that offline if you'd like.
I would love to talk to you.
Thank you. Yes?
Do you have any recommendations or other information to share regarding outfits like LifeLock or ID Shield?
I didn't plant him. I swear to God, I didn't plant him in the audience. Okay. Yeah, look, the reason, I read a lot on neurotic. Okay, when I looked at this field, my background is financial services, so I just go back and think of all the information I had on all my clients. Okay, and then I saw these laws coming out, and I went, holy Crayola. Okay, there's actually federal and state regulations where businesses have to do something, so I saw it as an opportunity. When I did my investigation before I got into the field, it's my opinion that Invisys offers the most comprehensive suite of products and services, okay? The other thing is, I offer identity theft either as an individual, as an employee benefit, but I didn't want to be a benefit salesman, okay? What I wanted to do was really get immersed in the market and be able to provide value to businesses to try to earn their business maybe on the employee benefit side. Now I'll get to LifeLock. Love LifeLock. 5 years ago when I used to do this, didn't have to spend a dime or nickel advertising because they always advertised, okay? But I talk about that top-down culture of security. I think it's about a year and a half ago, LifeLock was fined $100 million for violating a 2012 agreement where they were fined $10 million for not protecting their clients' information, okay? So that just doesn't make me comfortable, okay? Everybody forms their own opinions in the room. But LifeLock, in my view, is really a marketing machine, and they do a heck of a job. And I don't dislike them because they save me from having to spend some marketing dollars as well.
You have an opinion on ID Shield, or maybe
Here's what I'll say. I would be happy to sit down and talk about, we offer an identity theft product, and I'd be happy to sit down and compare the products side by side if that's something you'd like to do, so you can make an informed decision as what might be best. Yes?
So I've been a victim of identity theft from the credit perspective and wasn't really aware of all of the different areas. How can we find out if we're a victim?
You know, there's really, it's very challenging. A lot of times the only way you find out is because you get that letter in the mail. I mean, you know, you just don't know what you don't know. And again, let me talk about, since we're talking about identity theft, you don't buy an identity theft protection product, it's never going to prevent you from being a victim. Never, okay? It's not insurance, but it acts like insurance. You buy that so that if you ever have a problem and you have a good plan, you rest easy because you know that plan is going to take care of things, okay? But again, well, you know, and there's a couple of components in plans, you know, like, you know, a good plan is going to monitor, we're going to, you know, scan the World Wide Web and everything, but that's really, and I shouldn't say this, but that's really not important, okay? Because the bad people, they have your information, okay? You know, we could find out that you know, chances are most people in this room were affected by the Equifax data breach. Anybody have a credit report? Okay. So what you really want to do is you want to be in a position, you want to be able to sleep at night, just like insurance. You don't buy health insurance because you want to get sick. You buy health insurance if you're sick, you have a cure. You don't buy fire insurance because you want your house to burn down. You buy the insurance so that if you have a problem, you know, you go into recovery mode. Identity theft protection works the same way. You want to be able to go into recovery mode immediately, and if you have a good plan, doesn't matter where you have the problem, they're going to take care of it. So unfortunately, to answer your question, there is no way to determine this. I mean, you can pull your credit report regularly, but that doesn't mean that in between the times you pull it, there's no way to know. Anything else?
We have one over here.
I'm sorry?
Okay, so, you know, she said, identity theft, our company, identity theft, she had somebody, she's very creative. She took our information, made up a check, looked us up on the internet, and knew who the president was, and started to perform like he was.
Yeah, let me address.
But we don't have anybody to, you know, now we have to defend ourselves. The bank was very good, but where's the insurance and who looks
I love
out?
this. Again, I swear she's not a plant. We offer the only business identity theft product on the market. Because exactly that she said, businesses are susceptible to identity theft. Sunbiz.org, go on sunbiz.org. Can you get some information on your business on sunbiz.org? Think about, they find out who the owner is, they have a data breach, they get some personal information on that owner, they go out there and go crazy in the business's name. Okay? As a matter of fact, the owner, CEO, and founder of Invisys, his name is James Harrison. I used to say 3 years ago. It's probably about 6 or 7 years ago. He was at a conference of the National Associations of the Secretaries of State, who we have an endorsement from. And 6 or 7 years ago, they were talking about business identity theft. It's a big issue. Okay? So they left that conference. They created a white paper, of which he was one of the co-authors. And they were going to do all these things 6 or 7 years ago to mitigate the amount of information that was available on sites like sunbiz.org. Well, it's 6 or 7 years later, okay, and not a lot has gotten done. So because of that, we offer the only business identity theft product on the market as well. And it provides, but it's the same thing. We can't prevent your business from becoming a victim. But what we can do is, just as we provide recovery for individuals, we can do those same things for your business.
And do you also prosecute people?
Well, we don't, but again, what we will do is if it gets to the case where it's going to be prosecuted, we have information that we can provide to help make the case as strong as possible through our recovery processes. Anything else? Again, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mark. And we do have a lunch coming out any minute here, so take a break, lunch will be served. I just wanted to make a couple of comments regarding what PayMaster does. And we go through voluntarily, I started it about 10 years ago. Back then it was a SAS 70, it then changed to SSAE 16, and now I just found out from our auditors who are coming to our office on Monday, it's now an SSAE 18 or a SOC 1 report. And that's where we have independent auditors coming into our office a couple of times a year, and they go through our systems. They check for, to make sure we have the proper software in place to prevent cyber attacks, and that we're taking care of your data and keeping it secure. So it's something that any business can go to a public accounting firm and ask if they do. So it gives you that another level of assurance that a third party is coming in and actually testing your systems. I did want to recognize a couple of people in the room. You'll have them come up and introduce themselves later. But from our operations, we have Corey James in the back. We have Stephanie and Catherine, who is out front checking people in. And I'd also like to identify Ellie, who is my assistant. And without her, this may not have gone as smoothly. She spends countless hours in getting the APA. So thank you, Ellie. And she also does a wonderful job on her monthly newsletter. If you are not getting the monthly newsletter, on our website, right on the bottom, there's a link where you can sign up. So. All right, so it looks like lunch is on its way out, so enjoy, and we'll pick up right about 1 o'clock.